Dan Morgenstern, you back now?
I'm here. I wasn't away.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just wondering if you had anything to offer. I know at one of our conferences up at Columbia, you addressed the luncheon crowd, and pretty much the first thing you said was, by the way, nobody can become self-sufficient by being a jazz journalist. Is that more so the case today or less so, do you think?
Well, it's very difficult to do that exclusively unless you luck out and land a job like being an editor of a magazine or something in with a record company, or in other words, a job. If you're freelancing as a writer, I think it becomes very problematic because there simply aren't enough outlets that will pay you a decent wage for what you do. Even the best paying, maybe somebody you can land a piece in some major non-music publication, but otherwise you're exceedingly limited. And as we all know, there are publications that don't pay anything. You just want to keep your name out there and get some free records, or get to go to clubs without paying the cover charge. I mean, those are things that are helpful, but no, I don't know. I mean, Howard, how many members? You have a large membership, and it's wonderful to have an organization like the JJA, but have you ever done any statistics on how many of the members are full-time jazz writers?
We have done that survey, and yes, it's certainly a minority. No, very few people. We pitch ourselves as writers, broadcasters, photographers, and new media professionals. And yes, by far, the people who are full-timers at an institutional publication, radio station, less often a record company now, they're the ones who are full-timers, and everybody else is teaching or teaching and writing and doing radio, maybe doing publicity stuff. Maybe they've got another kind of writing job also. And that's certainly the way I pitch myself.
Yeah, the teaching is something that we haven't really talked about, but that, of course, is another phenomenon that has arisen in the recent decades, and that is the rise of jazz academics. There's a good supply of them, and they produce a lot of books and a lot of hot air. And,
well, I wonder.
Not part of the scene.
I find it frustrating that jazz academics do not usually address people unless they are instrumentalists. And I think that we could be growing the jazz audience if jazz education also turned its attention to people who are going to be the listeners of tomorrow, the listeners of today, the friends of the kids who are taking the instrumental classes. I'm looking for some questions from the crowd, but I'm not seeing questions come up in my chat box. People, if you have a hand on your webinar control panel, please click the hand. That means that we can see that you actually are seeing the chat box. So please click on the hand if you see the chat box. And if you have a question and you can't get to me on the chat box, I suppose you can send me an email at jazzmandel@gmail.com. It's a little tricky for me to run that at the same time, but I'll try. Do you panelists have questions for each other about the shape of the jazz journalism world as it is now?
Well, one thing I would, would like to say is that we very much need all of you who are writing and talking about the music, and because the music needs people who can publicize it, who can help the artist reaching an audience, who can do something to improve the listening skills of the audience, and in general, it becomes a labor of love, and that's really what it amounts to. And it's something that is, in spite of its poor source as an income, it's something that is very important to the music. It's something that really helps to keep the music alive, and it's something that can be very satisfying, and it's something that's very much worth doing.
I am seeing questions now come in, so let me just ask a couple of them. My goodness. Someone asked, do we as a group make jazz journalism less viable as a profession by putting so much quality work out there for free? Matt, you had made a plan to only work for pay, to write for pay, and yet you've got your free blog too. Does that jeopardize your...
Well, for the past year, I've only I've sort of been lazy on my blog. I've been just reposting links to things that I've written around the web. But the deal I made with myself was that I didn't want to write unless I was paid, and if I wasn't paid, I would do it on my own blog. It's just, I don't know, I wanted to be more serious and just go for it, so that's just what I decided. But I don't think that it at all makes it less, if I remember the question, that it makes it less legitimate.
Less viable, less financially viable.
Viable. Because, I mean, that's a question that sort of extends beyond jazz journalism into everything. But it's just a reality, and like, if you're good and you are aggressive and you try to get people's attention, then I think that it's worth it.
I think there's two ways to answer that question. One is that, in theory, yes, if there's more, if you can say that if there are more people willing to do this for free, then people are less willing to hire somebody to do it for pay. But on the other hand, I think jazz is in a place with its relationship to other music these days, and to the arts in general, and to really its place in American culture, that the more activity is going on around jazz, the more interested people are in actually paying attention to it. And I think a lot of interesting things and opportunities can emerge out of the online marketplace, the online discussion world. You see this often, in many times in which a sort of internet flare-up over a certain issue in music will surface into the wider public consciousness, and I think a lot of opportunities definitely come through that direction as well.
I'm seeing a lot of questions that I hadn't seen before. I should say that Alex Rodriguez says that I'm quite wrong, that there are a lot of people who are taking jazz survey courses today, so that academics are not only talking to instrumentalists. Let me see if I can make out a couple of these other questions. Let's see. Along with, sorry, go ahead. Somebody have something they're trying to say? I'm having a little difficulty reading some of these notes. This is a question that J.R. Carroll from artsviews.org asked Patrick. The disappearance of jazz programming and musical programming generally from public radio has become almost epidemic. Unfortunately, what in many cases replaces the music is news talk from NPR. Does that put a BlogSupreme in an awkward position? Are musicians and journalists being forced into a regrettable and possibly unnecessary conflict with each other because of the priorities of, I guess, the journalistic overlords not matching the interests of the jazz journalists and the jazz musicians?
Well, I probably shouldn't speak about, say, the recent cutbacks at WGBH or anything like that, being that WGBH is a partner of ours, I mean, in a number of ways. But, and I also actually don't know much about it, but my understanding, at least of that situation, and at many public radio stations across the country, is that music and cultural programming is getting pushed back in favor of news programming, news and talk programming. And I'm not really able to sort of talk about why that is. I mean, I just don't know. It must have to do with some perception having of public of radio station managers figuring that this is what audiences want at this time. I mean, obviously, I think it's regrettable to see people who focus on arts and who are trying to broadcast music not be heard anymore. But I couldn't tell you why exactly some radio station managers or program directors feel as if these things are these changes need to be made, or even whether seeing them as opposed is the right lens on the situation. Sorry, I just don't really have any greater insight into it than many of the rest of you.
Well, I think a lot of these issues that people are bringing up are the very things that we're trying to investigate, and the JJA is looking into it all the time. Our members are looking into it. These are the stories. What's happening with jazz radio? Why is there a move toward news and information? Is it purely financial? What are the alternatives going to be if there are going to be any? Let's see, there was something else that came up. Oh, somebody wanted to know about the national interest in regional scenes and how much regional scenes can get out of jazz journalism on larger scale. Patrick, do you look into regional scenes and think that that's a source of news also? Matt, are you able to take a story from a small region and blow it up into something that's of interest at the Forward or Hot House or New York City Jazz Record, or are those two localized also?
I have a few things to say, but if you have something else to say, go ahead, Matt.
Well, I don't really have the experience in that moment. So my focus, unfortunately or fortunately, is geared more towards New York, as it is as they say, the jazz hub of the world. So I tend to focus more on New York because it's where I live here, and it's where most of the things that a lot of people like to read about are happening. But that does not mean that there are not interesting things happening. I just don't know about them.
I think by paying attention to interesting, I think a lot of let me say this, I think a lot of the most interesting stuff that's going on in music journalism coverage has to do with the people who can investigate local issues and sort of make the local into global issues. I think my friend Giovanni Rusinello and Luke Stewart at Capital Dot do a great job of being a guide to what's going on in the DC jazz scene, but also into doing some really interesting stories and like flat-out journalism. Recently, yesterday, they published a profile of Taras Mateen, who is, as many people know, Jason Moran's bassist in the Bandwagon, but also has been around the scene for a long time. And he's played with, Art Blakey, and he's played with, on Outkast records. So, this is I don't think that anybody else has ever really done that story, and now that Taras Mateen lives in DC, they were able to talk to him about his sort of life and career and sort of profile that. And these are the sorts of, that's a great example of a local story that can be a national story. A few years ago, a sophomore in college named Dean Christensen started RVA Jazz, which was just a way to follow the Richmond, Virginia jazz scene and what was going on then. And he since moved out of town and sort of passed on the torch to somebody else. But what that's been able to do is to be able to make what they do in Richmond and broadcast it to a larger platform. And sort of keep people up to date. I've also followed, local blogs like the Seattle Jazz Scene, and I think these are the sorts of things which can make a local story into a national story, or one with a more universal interest. Another good example is, I think, what Peter Hem does at jazzblog.ca, hosted by the Ottawa Citizen. He does a good job of mixing things that have to do with the Ottawa jazz scene and musicians who are appearing in Ottawa, capital city of Canada, with just random things, funny things he sees on Regresh Mahankaple's Facebook feed, or to review albums that really anybody can pick up. And I think having a local focus or keeping tabs on very close and specific tabs on a scene. I'm also often reading things about the DC jazz scene in blogs like DCist or publication like the Washington City paper, which is a local alt weekly, and also talking to other journalists in the area about what goes on. I think you get a good insight into how a jazz scene works and how musicians work, and how you can apply that to how a wider jazz network would work, or how jazz scenes work anywhere.
Would some of those local publications be easier places to break in?
I think absolutely, especially because you can actually go up and talk to these musicians after a gig and get to know them, and sort of, if you're following your local scene, and somebody's willing to talk to you about it, then you have an opportunity to pitch a local publication to be a part of that, especially if your city has a local alt weekly or perhaps a radio station, to be involved in, or if you're passionate enough about it and you think that where you are has a really great scene, you can blog dealing with that alone.
Does that activity in itself, win a writer credibility? Just the constant being on the scene, publishing whatever you can, wherever you can. Is that what makes us credible?
No, I think it's doing it well that makes somebody credible. But getting to know, getting to know one musician will lead to connections that they've made with other musicians in other cities, and will lead to other connections in other places. And I think you getting involved in your local in a local scene is something that I've been trying to do more of since I moved from New York to Houston. And I've been happily rewarded every time I've tried to sort of follow the career of interesting musicians in this area.
Somebody wants to know how many jazz artists, Matt and Patrick, are your Facebook friends? And how do you handle Facebook requests from jazz artists?
Not that many. I mean, I guess that, I don't know. Nate Shinnon wrote an article in Jazz Time a few years ago about being Facebook friends with jazz musicians. I mean, I guess it depends on whether or not you're a critic. Like, this gets into the question of the difference between criticism and journalism, as you have written in your little capsule. But I think that it's okay to be friends with jazz musicians like Facebook, but I'm not really, because they don't friend me and I don't really friend them.
Does anybody have anything to say about why jazz interest in general has dropped off?
No.
Yeah, and you're the longest observer of this.
That's a pretty big question.
I think it has to do with that you can't really dance to it anymore. You can, but it's not really a dance music. So I think that's partly the reason that by the 1950s it basically stopped being a music that you dance to as it evolved. I think that's a big reason why it's not so really relevant, but I think there are many reasons.
Let's see. Is there room today for jazz stars to pop up? Could we make some of these younger musicians celebrities like Esperanza has become?
Well, I think she's great. I mean, I think it also has to do with the artist too. I think that there's no reason why she shouldn't deserve all the credit for being famous. Obviously, she must have very good artists and whatnot, but I think that the musicians are also talented people who, when they get attention, they deserve it. And it's something that I guess a journalist picks up on.
I think the sort of system of creating stars or musicians that people talk about is kind of a necessary consequence of of the way that music is put together and marketed and packaged and sort of delivered to people these days. There are certain artists people will want to talk about, and certain people who have their sort of stories more readily available to other people. And certain artists who are perhaps more photogenic or are bridging certain areas of popular culture together. And I think that that'll obviously create lots of potential for some artists getting more attention than others. Whether or not that's a good thing, I don't know, but I certainly don't begrudge it of anybody who has that sort of level of success. In fact, I think it's pretty great.
Yeah, we're all for that. Let's see. Next time we do this, it would be great to make comments in addition to asking questions, says Pamela Espelad. Yes, it would be. There's a lot to learn about this software. And we will have to continue it in about a month when we pick up the webinar discussions again, talking principally about coverage of jazz festivals. So on August 15th, we are going to reconvene in this very space, 8 p.m. EDT, and the JJ will run its second webinar on covering of jazz festivals. We ask you all to watch your email boxes. We'll be notifying you exactly how to register for that webinar. James Hale from the Ottawa Jazz Festival is one of the panelists we've got for that. Others are to be announced. And we urge you to look at our Facebook page, the JJA Jazz Journalists Association Facebook page, also jjanews.org for further information on these webinars and other things that the JJA is doing. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions tonight. A lot of the very specific and hands-on questions we will deal with in workshop-oriented webinars to come. And I want to thank Patrick and Matt and Dan and Dan's son Josh and Joanne Kaywell and all of you people who came and participated in the webinar. There were about 55 or 60 people at various points. So again, thank you everybody. This is Howard Mandel, and I'm going to say good night to Dan Morgenstern, Patrick Jarenwattananon, and Matt Kassel. And good night, everybody. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you to Howard, and thank you to everybody.
Thanks, Joanne. Bye.
Thank you.